All right, we're going to wrap up this chapter by talking about early childhood education. There's been a push in our culture and in some other cultures around the world to introduce education earlier and earlier in children's lives. So let's talk a little bit about some of the issues having to do with that. So first off, let's be really clear the difference between daycare and preschool. Daycare is, an option for supervision of children whose parents are not available for whatever reason. They're at work or, whatever is causing them to need to have their children in daycare. Most daycare centers are going to be, all day, 5 day a week enrollment. A lot of them won't even allow you to enroll your child for part of the day or certain days of the week because they want to have continuity and consistency and stuff like that. A lot of times they want you to enter into like academic year-long contracts to provide continuity where, you are committing to bringing your child 5 days a week, all day long for the entire academic school year. So daycare is kind of, the key thing I want to get across is that a lot of times it's longer hours. The official daycare, I'm not talking about babysitting, stuff like that. I'm talking about daycare. Preschools, on the other hand, because their focus is about, developing skills that are going to be necessary for later learning, and we'll talk a little bit about what they consider skills and stuff. A lot of times they are very short sessions. Depending on the age of the child, it might be an hour a week. It might be, 2 hours at a session. And usually you'll take your child to preschool 1 or 2 days out of the week. It's less common to have a preschool that is 5 days a week. You're moving into a little bit more daycare when your preschool is meeting 5 days a week or is more than 4 hours at a stretch. Because children can't really be little children, when we're talking about preschool, we're usually talking about 2 to 5 year olds. Most kids in our school system enter kindergarten at about age 5. You're not required to have your children in school until they're age 8 in Washington state. That's pretty common around the country. 8 seems to be a really common cutoff age where now you are in fact expected to have your children in school after the age of 8. So preschools would be for those years prior to the start of kindergarten, typically. So they come in different styles. There's the child-centered programs, and these are the kinds of programs that would include Montessori. A lot, I have a couple of friends who have been Montessori teachers or who are currently Montessori teachers, and one of their biggest complaints is how many parents bring their preschoolers to Montessori expecting a lot of academic skills building. Montessori was never designed to be an academic, pre-K kind of training. It is designed to help children to develop pride in their own abilities, help them to decide what their own interests are, to facilitate them pursuing their interests, to experience the sense of accomplishment from following through on something. They do some pre-literacy kinds of activities and some pre-numerosity things too, I would say, because they have oftentimes activities that involve organizing things by shape or color or size. That's kind of pre-mathematical. They'll have activities that help them to, like, you'll trace letters or other, but these are all very much literacy. This is not Montessori is not designed to teach children to read or these kinds of things. And a lot of parents mistakenly believe that Montessori is somehow like an advanced academic preschool, and it's not. It was never intended to be that. Montessori is intended to help kids to gain confidence, become exploratory. If an individual child really is interested in a particular activity and nobody else wants to do it, that child can still pursue that. You don't have to do what the rest of the group is doing in Montessori. So Reggio Emilia is another kind of program, and really I distilled it down into 2 words. Everything that they're doing is really to try and help the child to develop creativity. It's not about school skills or anything like that. It's about helping the child to look at the world through their own lens and to pursue their own interests and things like that. And then Waldorf schools are, again, you'll notice creativity is the number one thing that I listed because that's really historically, over the course of all time, Waldorf has really tried to focus on creativity, social understanding. How do I get along with the other people in the world, right? Like it helps to build what Gardner would call interpersonal intelligence, right? Like how do I react to other people? How are they reacting to me? How can we work cooperatively? How can I get my needs met while they're also getting their needs met? Stuff like that. And then emotional growth. So that would be what Gardner would call intrapersonal intelligence, learning to not have a temper tantrum when things don't go your way, those kinds of things that are really common in preschool kids. So Waldorf is helping them to grow as people and really as like independent people who will, trust themselves, and things like that. So none of these child-centered programs are concerned per se with children entering school knowing how to read or knowing how to sit still and be quiet and sit through a lesson or any of those things. It's all about fostering the child to grow into its best self. Teacher-directed programs, on the other hand, are focused on building school skills. So you're going to see that there's academic subjects being taught by a teacher, and there can be I put an entire class, but in, let's say it's a group of 4-year-olds, an entire class might consist of 5 kids. But instead of each individual child sort of pursuing what they're interested in and an adult helping to facilitate and scaffold them through that, like you might see in Montessori and the other child-centered programs, in the academic teacher-directed programs, you're going to see all of the kids working on letters and all of the kids working on numbers, all of them doing shapes like that. And really, the teachers are trying to teach the kids at a young age how to listen to the teacher and how to sit quietly while something else is going on and really preparing them for entering school. They make a really big distinction between, okay, right now we're in class and we're working right now, and then we get to go to recess and then we get to play. Whereas with the child-centered programs, play is the learning. And so the child may think that they're just playing with the macaroni, but some of them are colored blue and some of them are colored orange and some of them are natural colored. And they're maybe sorting them because it's fun and they're learning about colors and they're learning about sorting and categorizing and stuff like that. Whereas in teacher-directed programs, they're like, okay, let's all sit still, be quiet. We're going to go over the number 5. And then when we're done with this, we can all go outside and play. So we don't use play to facilitate learning necessarily in the teacher-directed programs. Typically, the teacher-directed programs are much less expensive than the child-centered programs because of the teacher-child ratio. You can have, 5 kids to 1 teacher in a 4-year-old class in a teacher-directed program, whereas over in one of the child-centered programs, you might have 1 or 2 kids per teacher because we need to make sure that all the kids are safe, all the kids are, engaged, all the kids are doing something that they want to be doing, and we have to be a lot more flexible. So you tend to pay more when you have to pay for more teachers, per kid. Intervention programs are kind of built off the teacher-directed programs with this mindset that there are certain kids in our culture who may not have had a household environment that facilitated them getting ready for school. It's kind of along the lines of Alfred Binet's perspective on, testing children to see if they are cognitively ready to enter school, and believing that all they need is some remediation to get them up to, readiness for school. Head Start takes that same basic perspective, that all kids can achieve and all kids can do well, but some kids are going to enter school more prepared because of the household that they lived in or maybe the preschool that they attended or whatever, and that's going to cause the kids who weren't in those situations to be disadvantaged. And so from the very get-go, they're going to fall behind. And so Head Start programs are usually public supported, and they typically feed the kids during the day. The kids at Head Start tend to be there all day long. They may I volunteered in a Head Start program when I was a college student, and some of the kids were there for all day in the morning, some were there all day in the afternoon, and then others were there all day from morning till evening. And so it kind of is a function of what the parents have going on and what the alternative would be for the child if they weren't at Head Start. The premise is that with the support and nutrition and interaction and all the things that are going on in Head Start, that these children will be better prepared to learn when they get to school so that they won't fall behind as a function of their household setting or the daycare that they would have been in otherwise and stuff like that. And it was a great plan, and it does work to a certain extent, but for most kids by about 3rd grade, about age 8, you can't really tell which kids had been to Head Start and which had not, if you are just comparing across kids from the same, demographics and economics and like that. So it kind of makes you think, well, it doesn't seem to have the long lasting impact that was the goal of Head Start. Some research is suggesting that it can be more effective if we have additional support through elementary school. So that if you have a child who, like their household situation probably didn't change that much between when they needed Head Start and now that they're at school. And so now they're coming home to an empty household or other things. So after school programs are necessary to sort of bridge that gap so that those kids are in a safe, stimulating environment that will allow them to continue to grow and develop like they had when they were in Head Start. So in the research on those kids who got to do those kinds of programs, who maybe they came to school early, ate breakfast, had, stuff that happened prior to the onset of school, then they were there for school, then they had after school program where again they got fed, had things to do, people helped them with their homework. Those kids who had that kind of bridge, you tend to see the benefit through high school and so on. So it looks like the problem that we do see with Head Start is that the support disappears after the child has moved on into regular school. And having the support disappear is probably not the right strategy. All right, well that concludes early childhood education, the different kinds of programs that kids can adopt. The great news is parents get to decide on these things. The bad news is they get to pay for them also. So it's a tough thing in the U.S. for parents to figure out what to do with their children, to their children during this period with regard to preparing them for school. But it's definitely an individualized decision, that's for sure. Well, that concludes cognition in the 2 to 6 year period. So I will see you next for social development in the 2 to 6 year period.